right. Welcome to UFO Classified. I'm just kidding. Welcome to Expanding Frontiers Research. You got to see my old promo, actually a couple of them, and so I will apologize. It's been a very interesting week in my world, and so I know that you guys love to just roll with me, whatever happens on the back end of things, and we'll just be really excited that you can actually edit this out. So all of you who are viewing this live, you'll have that memory because I'll be taking that off the internet very, very soon. So I want to just, first of all, give a shout out to everyone that's here. I have a dedicated group of people who I really enjoy talking with every week and hearing their comments in chat. I want to thank Peter and Mario and everyone that gets in here, really helps to create a cohesive community. As all of you know who followed my work over the years, I have been through different stages of my exploratory process. I've gone from somebody who was very naive and believed in a lot of things that people were telling me, and through lesson after lesson and really dedicating myself to making sure I was getting to the bottom of claims people were making, I have a much different opinion of things now. So when some people call me skeptical, I will say, no, I'm not skeptical. I'm a realist. People have to make substantiated claims, and nothing speaks of that more than the latest mayhem in the UFO Twitter world and with congressional hearings, the David Grush testimony, and some of the things that have taken place since that happened. I want to just mention again, as I talked about over the years, there are a specific group of people who have had a hand in promoting stories that are absolutely negligent. They aren't true, and they're recycled stories. And I think that we have to look really carefully at their motivations. And while people are getting on social media and seeing all of these accounts saying, yes, let's go, this is all about truth and disclosure, and we're going to let our pitchforks and do all of these things, we have to step back and say, A, who are these social media accounts? B, are they bought and paid for by specific people promoting this narrative? And C, can things truly be vetted? These are critical questions to ask. I've had a lot of clients come into the studio and ask me, we saw, it sounds like we've recovered UFOs, and people that would never in a million years go out on that limb, but because they've heard it in the mainstream media, and the mainstream media is slow to catch on this one, then, their minds are open to that, but they will quickly get an education when they watch the show or come into my midst. I want to just thank you for letting me go on my little holy rolling brigade there. I want to thank Jack Brewer and Barry Greenwood for being a part of our nonprofit Expanding Frontiers Research. You can go check that out at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. You can pledge your support to our nonprofit, and then you can also visit my Patreon page. And I want to thank the supporters who help to keep the show going and paying costs for that and production. I want to also just say, this last week, Jack Brewer did an incredible interview with Jensine Anderson. She's an independent scholar and author, and she talks with Jack about her latest book and multiple potentially deceptive layers of the UAP threat narrative. That is a really good interview, and you have to understand her background and also really listen to what she's telling you. So go to Expanding Frontiers Research to catch that interview. Make sure you get in here and you like, subscribe, share. Let me repeat that. So anyway, there you have it. I want to look through the chat and say, hey, Scott and Kodiak, nice to see you. Lord Ludicrous, Steve, Jim, Mystico, Sheldon, I'm seeing new faces. Michael Reynolds, Avik, thank you guys. Renee. Okay, thanks guys. Tom X, yeah. All of you guys. Amy, so we will get back and Rachel and thanks you guys for getting in here. So I'm going to welcome Jack Brewer. Mr. Brewer,
hi.
Staying out of trouble?
Never.
Sweet. This is why we work together. This is good.
It is. She's only asking that for me to clarify it. She already knows the answer. But good to see you, Erica, and everyone in chat. Thanks for being here. Lord Ludicrous, Steve Long, Jim, Amy, really great to have all of y'all here.
And we can have it. Yep. Absolutely. So I want to just say, you introduced me. You arranged for our guest this evening to come on the show, and I've been watching her posts, which are I love what she has to say, and her videos that she has on her YouTube channel are freaking off the hook. I love it. It is very. I was telling Emily before the show that what she has done with not only her editing skills, with taking these great graphics, taking the narration, doing the research to investigate and dig into things. That's a really important thing for someone to do, and I give her a lot of props for doing that. So I'm so impressed. But Emily Louise, is a documentary filmmaker who makes strange and unusual shows about ghosts, about the cult of I Am, about what happened to Snippy the horse, and was Edgar Cayce a sleeping prophet or a fraud. She and one of my favorites. We're going to talk about the Secret Space Program tonight. But you can find her on Weird Reads with Emily Louise on YouTube, and you can also follow her at Weirds Reads Emily. Oh my Lord, Emily! I'm just going to bring you in here. Sweet mother.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me and for a lovely introduction.
Oh yeah, you know what? I am so excited to talk with you, and thank you, Jack, for lining this up. But watching your videos, watching the production, like I was saying, it's just like you dig in there, and this isn't just, I'm going to sit behind the scenes and take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that. You do your homework, and then you put together things that are so, I mean, it's really impressive, and you should be really, I mean,
Oh my God, you're
happy to have
going to
you.
make me cry. You're so nice.
No, it's really true. I mean, Lord knows, I look at a lot of YouTube stuff in my spare time, at 1, 2 in the morning, and you see a lot of things that are just, so I'm trying to get, clicks and bait people in, but very rarely do you see people that have information to give that is research, that you're really looking into with your delve into the Secret Space Program. You were telling us before the show that you spent several months digging into that and doing interviews before putting together your show. And so again, props to you for your wonderful work.
It's a lot. I think, yeah, just kind of wanted to, I don't know, do something that's a little bit more unique. Because like like a lot of these stories have kind of, things that I cover have been covered a million times before. They're not new. But I feel like I just wanted to put like a bit of a new, or like a different spin on things, not spin's the wrong word. I don't spin things, just, you know what I mean.
Right. No, I mean, it takes somebody that's really good at that craft to actually get the audience hooked, and then to provide information and to do it in a way that's quick enough. But, I mean, you're not making things up. I mean, it's like there is an art to that. And that's why some people win Academy Awards and some people, so I really appreciate what
I don't think I'm going to win one of those anytime soon, but I
never know.
I appreciate this. It's like foreshadowing the future.
So, okay, tell us how you got into this.
Gosh, where do I've always kind of been interested in these kind of stories. I used to be a really big UFO believer, like a really big. I mean, I was like all in on a lot of these stories, like Bob Lazar, things like that. Like I was hooked. I guess like in the pandemic, I had a lot of spare time. Obviously, I was kind of stuck at home. I was working like a service job, but obviously nowhere was open, so I kind of lost the job and suddenly had a lot of time and was like, oh, what am I going to do? And decided to just start a YouTube channel. And it started off like really kind of, I didn't really know what I was doing with it to begin with. And then I stumbled across a religious cult called Love Has Won, who I kind of weirdly got myself embroiled in and made like one of the first documentary, well, it was the first documentary about them on YouTube after the cult leader, the mother god figure died. And then from there, just kind of started digging into other kind of strange stories. So got really like kind of unhealthily obsessed with researching like New Age, like the kind of history of New Age, like how the New Age developed, and then decided to take a more critical look at a lot of the UFO stories that I had really been into and like believed over the years, which kind of has led me down the path that I am on now. Yeah.
That's a quick journey. I mean, though, for you to go from, believing in some of these things to getting good, researching things and then putting out good information, that's a quick transformation. And I'm sorry that you had to deal with some of the pitfalls of going down these rabbit holes, because there are a lot of pitfalls about this and digging. So how did you learn to discern good information from bad information?
Oh God. I mean, I've always kind of been a little bit paranoid, right? So, I mean, a lot of people would call me a conspiracy theorist. Like I'm quite, like skeptical of a lot of stuff. I don't know why, like the UFO thing. I think maybe because I never looked into it as much as I looked into other things, that I kind of, like I was just very interested in like the stories, but I never kind of like really dug into it. So I feel like I've always had like a critical eye, I guess. Just like digging into things. I don't know. I'm not sure. I just try and use my own discernment and not taking everything at face value. Like I think doing the research is important. Like you said, there's a lot of people, especially on YouTube, that kind of it's like a lot of rehashing of stuff, and there's never really any kind of like digging in under the surface. And I think that's quite important, especially with a lot of these stories. Like they have massive influence, right? Like huge influence. You might look at like UFO stories or stories of like Dulce base or the cattle mutilations. Come on, like it's just like weird little stories, but they have like real big impact on this world, like the world of UFOlogy and like the myth. And I think that's kind of something that I'm very interested in, is like how it kind of works like folklore in a way, like these stories, like so that what a story begins and then it gets picked up and then it gets expanded on by another person, and another person adds to it and another person adds to it. So I feel like if you really want to like unpick it, you have to find where it started. And that's what I find really interesting about a lot of these stories, is like trying to go back to like where it started, like with the secret space program thing, for example. But a lot of the secret space program stories that you have now, you can trace them back to Alternative 3, a mockumentary from the 70s and a fictional book from the 70s, and it's expanded on. Like it's not like the number one source, but it's a big source for so many of those conspiracies. Sorry, I'm rambling.
You are not rambling. I love it. And let's go back to, one of the first, you were mentioning that you got involved in researching a cult. And can you give us some information about why you started researching that and what happened along that path?
Sure. So I can't even remember where I first became aware of the Love Has Won cult to begin with. I think I might have seen something. I think actually there was a Vice thing that had come out about it, but it was about 10 or 15 minutes long, didn't really dig into anything. It was very kind of like surface level. And I was finding them on YouTube and seeing all of these live streams that this religious cult were doing, and they were like, I mean, we're talking real extremism, like, I mean, insane. The things that would happen on these live streams, you'd have followers being screamed at, you'd have like some of the most insane and intense outbursts from people, abuse, a lot of racism, like, I mean, it was horrific. And there was no kind of in terms of researching it, there was nowhere to go. There was no Wikipedia page for it. There was only a couple of forums. There was like a little bit on Reddit. So it was like trying to figure out what the hell was going on. So that was, I think, the first project that I really researched and kind of tried to get in touch with people that were involved in it. So I ended up speaking to a lot of the family members of people whose family members were part of the cult, and interviewing them and kind of getting their approval on making my video, which was really, really important. And yeah, I really kind of got sucked into that for a while and ended up yeah, a bit working on another project to do with that, but I can't really say. I'll be able to say more what it is at some point, but not now.
And thank you for sharing that. I mean, it is very it's a little disconcerting to try to, I mean, to talk about this in public. You know, these are our own experiences, and I can say from personal experiences I have many times. I mean, I was taken advantage of and given stories and led down a path, and I finally got out of that. And so I think these are important lessons for people to learn. When you contacted people's family members, how did they react?
Really positively, because nobody else was doing anything. And a lot of people were worried about their family members that were involved in it. And I think one of the things that whenever I'm making something, or whenever I'm kind of like researching a topic, is to always try and remember like the humans that are involved in it. May sound a little bit sappy, and maybe some people would accuse me of being too soft, but I feel like a lot of the time people can like lose sight of the fact that like these are real people, and it's trying to, you know, have like a little bit of empathy. You know, like some of the behavior, like talking specifically about Love Has Won, some of the things that you'd see on their live streams were absolutely shocking. But like, these are people that had, you know, been through some really harrowing things in their lives, which had led them to this point where they had been taken advantage of by somebody who had also had a series of harrowing events in their life, right? So there's like so much compounded, you know, like trauma, all of that kind of stuff. So I've tried to, even though I approach it with a little bit of like humor and stuff, I try to approach it with a bit more empathy than some people have, because a lot of people, you know, like the leader of the group, Mother God, Amy Carlson, she struggled with alcohol, drugs, and she was prone to a lot of outbursts, which would then get made fun of on social media, kind of become like a little bit of a meme. You know, anybody that made a video about her would put that in and, you know, laugh and do all of that. And, you know, so it was trying to look at it a little bit more empathetically, and like the humans that are involved in it, like the human aspect of it.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that, you know, when you're talking about that, there is a responsibility which you are laying out here when you're talking to people who have been have family members or have been through personal trauma. And, you know, you look at some of the online sleuths, and you look at, you know, how they get in there on YouTube, and, you know, they'll take a piece of a puzzle that was given to them on, you know, after a murder or different things like that. And then they're digging into things, and they're making claims that are basically, well, I mean, they're completely irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also doing that to get, you know, clicks and things like that. And so I think it really is, you know, it takes a lot of, you know, just foresight, a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding that there are these boundaries that need to be respected, and there are ways that people need to be treated, you know, with regard to that. So I appreciate you for saying that.
Absolutely. And I think the only time that I kind of, you know, because I do, like, again, I try and make like everything kind of as entertaining as possible. There are times when I'm, you know, going to be like taking the piss a little bit and doing things like that, but I try to direct it towards people that, you know, might deserve it, you know, because I'm not saying that you've got to extend empathy to everyone, right? Like, we don't. Right. Like, there are some people that you can just say like, that's a bad person. But yeah, I try, and when it's, you know, I don't know, when it's sensitive, I think you just got to like learn how to manage a lot of these kind of stories sensitively, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, and great point about, you know, having empathy for people that, you know, deserve empathy. And that, you know, when you delve into, you know, journalism, and I will never, you know, I'm not a journalist. I'm a person that has experienced things that wants to bring that forward to the world. And so, but I do try to subscribe to a code of ethics. and integrity, as does Jack, as does our organization. And you obviously are the same way. And so I appreciate that. And everybody that I can see in chat tonight has the same feeling. And that's, in the UFO world and conspiracy world and the paranormal world, it's like that's just been a wild west of people behaving badly and many, many people being manipulated and hurt.
Yeah.
So it is great to know that there are people out there that respect that. And so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I think it's important, definitely.
And so I know you've got, that rabbit hole that you went down. What else, when you started to realize some of the behind the scenes goings on, what were your thoughts and how did you react and pull yourself back?
But do you mean like in just like researching the UFO stuff? Like
yeah, in the cult world, because
okay,
that's pretty heavy.
So I think, not sure how much I should share. I had a friend that kind of fell really into like the Q stuff, and fell really hard and hasn't got out of it. If anything, it's just gone a lot worse. Also a lot of like secret space program super soldier stuff is wrapped up in that as well. And I think when you I don't know how to explain, like when you can like see somebody kind of start like falling for a lot of this stuff, right? Because I'll be real with you, like people would call me a conspiracy theorist, right? And I'm not saying that I would never sit here and say like, oh, conspiracy, like I'm not that person. But some of it is obviously like with the QAnon stuff, like you can clearly look at it and say this isn't real, right? So when you start to see somebody in your real life kind of go down that rabbit hole, it is kind of and go down it really quickly, it's kind of disturbing. So and how that also wraps in with a lot of new age stuff as well, because it's all very, they're all very like closely entwined. That was one of the things that really kind of got me to look into it. So I feel like having that person in my real life that was really, really like down this rabbit hole was kind of like my moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to try and find out where so much of this stuff is coming from. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that it's a personal thing, and I will say that I can't think of anybody that I know that has not been affected at some point in time by a loved one being involved in the QAnon conspiracy or by other people. We had, 3 days ago when President Biden was visiting Utah, there was a fellow that was shot and killed by the FBI for posting some very serious threats to different
I saw that.
leaders and things. And that, there are real world consequences that are devastating to not only, his loved ones, but to a community and to our, it's just trying to weed through this and see signs with your loved ones. That's a really important thing, because this has destroyed a lot of people's lives. And I want to just preface this by saying I don't know if he was wrapped up with the QAnon thing, given some of the posts and some of the ways that he was incited to believing what he was laying out on social media would lend, maybe a little thought to that. So I just want to say that it is important, and this is a really serious issue. So that is really great that people like you are shining a light on that.
Yeah, and it's so much of that, again, so much of it is like wrapped up in like the UFO world as well, right? Like I see a lot of people on social media recently, especially like this week, being like, oh my God, the UFO world suddenly like QAnon. I'm like, kind of always has been. Like it really,
yeah,
like I'm like,
suddenly. Yeah,
I'm like, where have you been? Because this has been going on for decades. I mean, it's
absolutely.
wild.
I mean, and that's the thing that it's been so fascinating researching this, and then looking at the archive that I have, and looking at Jack and the research that he's done with all the FOIA requests and putting together. This organization back in the 50s was connected with this political movement, and so on and so on. And now, unfortunately, because of the internet, this just has legs that don't quit, and it has the capability to reach so many people and do a lot of damage. And I'm hoping at some point in time somebody will start to anybody, like, just pull this back. This really is a detriment to our personal lives, to national security, to the state of our world. I mean, that sounds very fatalist, but it's true. These things have very broad repercussions.
Yeah, and there's the part of me that wonders, like, how much of it is kind of by design, almost, in a way. Like, it's very, so much of it is very, like, insidious and very calculated, and it makes you wonder, like, what's the purpose of it? Maybe that's me going, like, a bit too down the conspiracy rabbit hole.
I think a certain amount of that is what draws some of us. Like, I think it's really interesting that so many of us were so much more vested initially in believing the UFO narrative. And I think that is because it's somewhat by design that I've joked around that I'm a card-carrying conspiracy theorist, but I require evidence to verify the conspiracy. Like, it's just naive to think there's no conspiracies. There's too many, that are proven and documented. And so I think that's kind of how the UFO story piggybacks in, that those of us that kind of consider ourselves maybe somewhat countercultural or untrusting of authority figures that coats and ties and slick presentations, it kind of, the UFO story kind of sneaks in with it until you take a close look. And then it's like, no, a lot of this just doesn't hold water. Yeah.
Well, you see all of those characters with, like the characters that you're explaining, like that is, there's so many of them. You look at it and it's all, intelligence people, Air Force, military. It makes you just wonder, what, like it makes, I like seeing a lot of stuff on, like, because I'm kind of like an observer of UFO Twitter. I don't really engage, except for, like, when I feel confident enough to, like, rant a little bit. But, like, seeing, like, the like people that will on one hand say that they don't trust, like, the government or certain agencies, and then you have somebody like David Grush come out and suddenly everybody's making ribbons saying, "I stand with David Grush." It makes no sense to me. I'm like, I thought you weren't supposed to trust these people.
Point. Wow. And it just speaks to the obvious, but somehow that eludes people. But I think too, it's like I've talked about, like I think all three of us have talked about, you look at his handlers behind him. You've got Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and then all of the people that do these YouTube shows that are promoting a specific narrative. And you just think, okay, this is, there's nothing on the level about this. And when you try to ask logical questions about it, then you get this group of, whether they're, I'm sure that some of them are probably bought and paid for by that specific group, or people, like Peter Thiel, or people like, people that have a vested interest in making billions of dollars and shaping the narrative on the political landscape front. There's so many factors to this, but yeah, the Grush thing was just, that's going to be interesting and good for you for just looking at UFO Twitter and occasionally engaging.
Yeah, otherwise I look at it almost every day. Well, every day, or multiple times a day. I am a little bit of an addict, but I don't really engage. But I just kind of like lurk around and see what people say. But I see just some of the most wild things on there. Just people that are just like fully all in. And it's like, it doesn't matter what he says at this point. People are already like, they're just like, yeah, I'm gonna stand with him. Like, that's my boy. Like, they're just like fully in. And
Right.
it's
Take a bullet
disturbing.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, it's the political aspects of it are so married to the fanaticism that it's almost impossible to separate the religious fanaticism and the political extremism. It seems to me to be virtually one and the same. And, talking about the Q stuff, for those that don't know, I live in Central Florida, and aspects of it have become so prevalent and so widely accepted that it is not particularly unusual for me to be in a business scenario with some type of service provider that will just start talking about something like when Trump is going to be reinstated as president. Just like off the cuff, start explaining to me that they know this is going to happen. And I bring this up because I think it relates to what both of you are talking about, the extremism you see and the craziness you see, as well as having some empathy targeted in right ways, given in appropriate ways, for people that when you see this stuff on the internet, it's like it's not really real life. Like, like reading in the newspaper about a fire somewhere or a war zone in a country you don't really even know where it is, maybe, or something like that. I don't think people really accept these things they're saying when they're just like sitting around McDonald's having coffee, talking about, that all of this supposed international intrigue that they somehow think they've got an inside scoop on.
I think they do. I think these people are, having some of them that have been close to me, they really truly passionately believe this. It is, and that's what is so amazing, because you look at the way so many people have been passionate, and they're getting out and they're going to school board meetings and they're doing things to try to change things in their community. But what they don't understand is they're trying to burn books and prohibit us from learning about history. And, so it's unfortunate that the amount of misinformation, disinformation is at such a high level. It's detrimental. And I don't think I've ever seen anything. Granted, I'm not, that old, but this is a pretty serious propaganda campaign.
Yeah, and again, like part of me wonders just how much of it is by design. Like like, can you blame people for not trusting governments? Of course you can't. Like, conspiracies are real and they happen continuously, and we don't know about half of them, and we don't know half of the ones that we do know about. We know a very small percentage of the ones that we do know about. So and there's that kind of thing when people talk about conspiracies and people falling down the rabbit hole. I feel like a lot of people forget that, like, it's in the world that we live in, who does trust that what you're being told by the government is real, right? So I feel like a lot of people don't factor that in, and that's probably important. Because, like, again, with like the Q stuff, it takes like very small, and the reason it works so well, and again, it makes you wonder, where did it come from? Is it by design? All of that kind of stuff. Is it takes nuggets of truth, right? It takes small things that are true, and then builds upon them into something that becomes just ridiculous. So it's easy to get people to buy into something when you've got those like nuggets of truth, right? That are right at the building blocks. But yeah.
And you also too, it's like you tap into a need in another human being. you're down on your luck, if you've been, if you have grievances, you want to find a community that can accept and understand you. And that's nature. And that is not a bad thing. It's when people are manipulated because of that need to find, a group. That's when things become dangerous, as we've seen with, in my opinion, reports that Lou Elizondo has gone out of his way to find different people in community and kind of convert them, potentially, allegedly radicalize them to that way of thinking, that ideology, which has nothing to do with science, which has nothing to do with really looking into UFOs and all the wonderful possibilities that we have, where we should be empowered. So I just want to say that, and I want to ask, and I want to thank Bill for being here. Bill Pullen has been on the show. We need to get you back, but he asked a question, so let me just go back here. So this is a question for Jack. Was the problem of invalid content as widespread back in the 80s and prior?
Oh, goodness, yes. With each decade, though, I think, and certainly if the two of you agree or disagree, please express it. With each decade, technology becomes more advanced, and it got easier to publish magazines, easier to publish books, easier to be on the radio. We started having what were known as e-lists, which were basically big email groups around the turn of the century. Then everybody had a podcast, everybody had a website. Then everybody's on social media. So if someone tries to lead you to believe that the UFO community was more harmonious or more critical thinkers once upon a time, I don't buy that. No, I don't think so. But have they been able to distribute it further and wider and appeal to mass audiences easier? Yes, I do think so. And I also think with what we've been considering about how much of it's by design, I'll just put it this way. If global adversaries weren't involved in attacking the American intelligence community and corporate espionage for high-tech contractors initially, they are now. It's too good an opportunity to pass up, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for those comments, Jack. Thanks for answering the question. And Michael Huntington, it's nice to see you and read your comments. All of you guys, thank you again for being such great people in chat and for providing thoughtful and rational discourse, conversations. I also wanted to take a moment to say, click like, subscribe the show. You can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out our blogs and things. So sorry for that little promo. I don't usually do that, but I'm trying to get better.
I need to do that. I don't do any of that on mine. I'm not one to be like, oh yeah, smash the like. I
know. I
just don't.
Maybe
I should do that. Maybe the algorithm would hate me less if I did that.
I don't know. Let me know how that works for you. But let's talk about the secret space program, because you did what, a 2.5 hour?
Yeah, something like that. It's about 2 hours 40 minutes. Which in hindsight, I should have released it like in 3 parts or something, because it is, we're pushing, like, we're up to like Gone with the Wind style
almost
length.
as long as Oppenheimer.
Yeah, like Martin Scorsese over here. Like, what am I doing? Why am I?
Yeah, but actually, it kept my interest the whole time. I was just like, oh, I've got to hear what's.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Put out there. Yes.
Yeah, it was wild, that, because I'd never actually heard of Alternative 3 until I'd started researching the Montauk Project. The Montauk Project was what really got me into it. and it was mentioned in the first book. And while I was making the Montauk Project documentary, I thought, oh, that would be all right. Alternative 3, that would be a short video. I can just do something really short on that. I came back to it and I thought, in the meantime, I had a bunch of different projects that I was going to do, like different ones that I've kind of parked. This is the thing with me. If you came and had to look at my computer, you'd be baffled at how many projects I start and then never, like people that I interview, all the like we're talking like massive Google Docs full of research. I will never get to it. Which is ridiculous. But I started looking into it and I found one of the first pieces that I found on it was by Martin Cannon. And he'd written on his blog, done like a little kind of history of it, and like had gone back and had like mentioned like Mae Brussel and people like that had been involved in kind of the evolution of it.
And I want to interrupt you really quickly to say that Martin Cannon said that he was very excited that you were going to be on the show.
Oh, he's great. He's like one of my favorites.
So
anyway. I'm not allowed to say that I like his book though, because he doesn't like his book. But anyway.
But thank you. I didn't mean to get you off course. I just wanted to let you know.
Anyway, so I kind of read that and then thought, all right, I'm going to try and go back and see where a lot of this came from. And so my first thing, I was like, because obviously there was the documentary came out in 77, mockumentary came out in 77, and then the book came out a year after. And I thought, oh, is there any way that I can find this guy that wrote this book, Leslie Watkins? Because I felt like he was like the key to kind of like understanding like how it kind of blew up a little bit. How did I find him? I think I found his son's website. His son is Graham Watkins, runs like a publishing company. And I think he's republished the book now. Found his son's website, emailed him, got in contact with Leslie, who's like 93, lives in New Zealand, like the sweetest guy. He's like really, really lovely guy. And just interviewed him, spent ages talking to him actually. It was really funny. When I was editing it, he would occasionally call me up and be like, "Are you done editing it yet? I'm worried I'm not going to make it until it's out," because he's quite he's quite getting on in the years. And then I just kind of like started picking it all apart and trying to structure it together. Because a lot of people have kind of spoken about, secret space program, and to be clear, when I'm talking about secret space program, I'm talking about people like Corey Good, like your 20 and back programs to Mars. I've been on Mars. I've been a super soldier. I'm not talking about, possible real world secret space programs that we're not aware of, which could well exist. But I got kind of like interested in the super soldier thing as well from watching. I don't know if you've heard of his show. James Rink does Super Soldier Talk. I got kind of obsessed with watching that for a while, and started to hear all of these people that were telling these stories, and I was like, this literally sounds like the plot of Alternative 3, right? Like this is what it is. And then found like Laura Eisenhower Jr., who's the great granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower, who believes that she was recruited as part of an alternative. Like she literally said, she was like, I've been in Alternative 3. Like that, genuinely believes it, and believes that what her and other people like Andrew Bashargo and all of the other people that are involved in this are doing is Alternative 4. That's what she calls it. It's like like the disclosure of it. That's Alternative 4. So I kind of just like fell down this the rabbit hole of it, and so much of the secret space program stuff also links in with like the UFO, a lot of the UFO disinformation. So like things like Majestic 12, for example, like Corey Good and David Wilcock have got that documentary Above Majestic, right? So they weave all of that into their narrative. So it was a very long research project, and I feel like the final script of it ended up being something like 30,000 words, and I still feel like one day I want to write a book about Alternative 3 and just like how influential it's, because there was so much that I had to cut out of that documentary.
Oh yeah, yeah. I really can relate to what you're saying about files all over the place full of links and notes that you may never even do a project on. Erica and I have a lot of that too, that we'll dive into something and we'll compare notes and we'll share notes. And I mean, it's like ongoing, you know, an ongoing topic. And then we'll be like, is there really a story here? Or is there a story here that we're not just speculating on? Is there anything we actually can add to this that hasn't been said already? And sometimes, like you mentioned, Ms. Eisenhower, for years, long before I was collaborating with Erica, I considered interviewing her, and never got around to inviting her because there's so many ethical questions around.
Oh yeah, you know? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because and again, you don't want to like cast aspersions on somebody, but there is a level of I mean, again, you don't know. Like, I wouldn't, and I try to be quite. How do I phrase this? When I was putting together the Alternative 3 documentary, you're dealing with a lot of people that have a lot of different beliefs, right? So a lot of people that think they're super soldiers, a lot of people who say that they've been through X, Y, and Z, and they've been, a lot of them believe that they've been victims of mind control and all of that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to be be like that's not true, because even the way I try to look at it is like, even if it's not true in like the real world sense, it is true for a lot of these people. They do believe it, and in a lot of ways that does make it true. I don't doubt that so many people involved in this secret space program stuff, and people like James Rink, who I truly believe that they believe they are super soldiers. And I'm not going to diagnose anybody with anything or do anything like that, but that I don't think that they're all lying. I do think that some of them are. I think that people like Corey Goode are. 100%. I think people like David Wilcock are, Randy Kramer to a certain extent. I think that those people are lying and are on a bit of a grift because they know that they can make money out of it. But there are some people that I think do genuinely believe it. And in that sense, I feel like, and I don't know, some people might disagree with me, but I feel like that should be kind of like handled a little bit sensitively, when you're dealing with people like that, who do believe that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I was, I remember going down that rabbit hole and watching the videos and seeing these people, and some you can tell are just, I mean, it is a grift, and some truly believe that. And just like with the, oh my gosh, what is it with certain people in Sedona who talk about my labs. Yeah. And you talk to these people and they genuinely believe this. And it's like, okay, I mean, it's a hard thing to think about. And yes, like you were mentioning earlier, we can't believe everything that our government tells us. We can't believe everything because there are lots of moving parts to that. There are a lot of different ideas. And so it's a hard thing. We have to question things and do our research. But with some of these things, it's just, I don't know. It's just so amazing and sad.
It is. And it's, again, like when you talk about, like the MyLab stuff, I think that there's some cases that you could point to for that being like incredibly real, right? And like a real thing. But I think, again, things kind of get built on top of it. I'm trying to find a way to phrase this, and then my brain goes and wonders how much of that is done on purpose, right. Almost to like to discredit something completely out of hand. I don't know. Like those are the questions that keep me up.
I think you hit on an important point earlier when you said a lot of this lore is grounded in factual circumstances and then takes off in different labyrinths.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I got interested in, as far as the my labs and things like that, was there were CIA squads that were just abducting people off the streets in the name of counterterrorism. And
Mm-hmm.
it was documented. There were trials going on around the turn of the century and within the last 20 years, even. And that I subsequently fell down the whole Guantanamo Bay thing and could see that they are experimenting and checking vital signs. And by all definitions, I mean, you can spin it any way you want, but they are attempting to indoctrinate and experiment with changing people's ideologies that are really strongly grounded in ideologies. And then to make it even more of a head scratcher, not even the periphery, but involved in these things were names like Colonel John Alexander, that
Right.
are 1 foot in the UFO world. When he's not advising on Guantanamo Bay, he's speaking at a UFO conference.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff there that I'll even circle back to when you were saying conspiracies are real. They're clear. They clearly actually happen. A lot of the time, the best we can learn is that we do our FOIA work, we get our public records, we look back through newspaper archives, and the best we can really come up with is there's people involved in this story that clearly know more than they're telling us and have interests that are not overt. And then sometimes we just can't really go any further with it.
And that's the thing that's maddening about it sometimes, because you hit a wall with it. You get to a point and you literally can't get any further, and it like the one thing that driving me insane at the moment is because I'm doing a lot of the videos that I'm doing at the moment are kind of leading up to MJ12. So I'm trying to do like a concise history of like 1980s UFOlogy. So one of the big projects that I'm working on is Paul Bennowitz, and trying to kind of look into that story in a detailed way. But I also find that with him, like, he almost gets removed from his own story a lot of the time. He's kind of become like a figure. I watched a video the other day that was like a really good documentary, but within like the first 5 minutes it said that he killed himself, and it's like, that's not true, that never happened. So he's kind of become like a mythological figure in the, like a ghost in the UFO world. But the one part of that story that I like literally obsessed with, but constantly hit the wall, is Myrna Hansen and like his involvement with that. It drives me crazy. I'm at the point where I'm like, did she exist? What was what's going on here? Because it's like, you can't
if she's using multiple names, why?
Yeah.
Like that alone indicates there's shenanigans afoot.
Yeah, it really, like, it drives you crazy. And trying to like piece these things together, especially with like the stuff I'm looking into at the moment, like with Majestic 12. I feel like I've been researching it for maybe like in detail probably like the past like 5-6 months, but I still don't understand. I'm still just like, it's still just like, I'll sit down and I'll just try and think about it, and I will just be like, I just don't, this is just going like, but it's designed to do that, right? Like that's what it's built to do that. It's almost like a kind of like an ARG in that sense, you know, like it's designed to drive you wild, crazy on this goose hunt. Goose hunt? Is that the right word?
That
Something
works.
like that.
Well, and it's amazing again, like how, you know, this MJ12 again, it's like coming up for a whole new generation of people. And
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Barry Greenwood and his colleagues did a very good job of, like, for 10 years researching that and putting that, you know, to bed. But yet here we've got, you know, the Elizondo crew and some of these people who are throwing this back out there, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, no, guys, it's nothing but the way the story came about and the players. And now we've got this new, you know, this new group doing that, you know, promoting that again, and then throwing in, oh, well, let's look back at Robert Wood and let's look back at some of these things. It's like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I will say too, in my archive here, that I do have some great tidbits from some of the people, Benowitz and Myrna Hansen.
Oh, really?
Yes, and MJ12 and the behind the scenes goings-ons and communications with Robert Woods and you know, some of these people. So I'll have to get going again on my scanning and
oh, definitely, that would be so useful.
I was incredible.
I was really lucky. I got to speak to Christian Lambright, and he gave me some really good audio recordings of Paul Benowitz. I mean, I'd never heard his voice before, right? Because he again, like there's so many videos about him, so many podcasts, so many things, but he is kind of taken away from this story, and he just kind of becomes it. I don't mean this. He absolutely was a victim, but it's like you don't really get to see like him like a kind of like a three-dimensional character, if that makes sense. So that I'm trying to make it more kind of a more kind of like in-depth look at it, but it's maddening. Like it's really, when I'm trying to like put timelines together, it just drives me crazy, because like one person says one thing, one person says another, and there's so much like back and forth and weird shenanigans going on. It's like very complicated, but yeah, like being able to like listen to audio recordings of him gives you a so much clearer idea of like what was going on, because I've got one from like 1980, from May 1980, which is like just in that time period, just where it's kind of beginning, and you know, it's like fascinating stuff to listen to. So yeah.
It absolutely is. And I want to just go back and for people who are watching the show who don't have an understanding of Paul Benowitz, I mean, Jack, break it down really quickly. 2 words or less, Paul Benowitz.
Sure. Paul Benowitz lived outside of Kirtland Air Force Base and managed to convince himself that it was under alien invasion, and then a series of mysterious people that we know who they are and where they work and that kind of thing helped convince him this was true. And that's where the story of Dulce and all of these things came from. And Myrna Hansen was one of the original people in this chain of events, reporting extraordinary circumstances that I gather that Emily, probably like me to some extent, is not even completely sold on Ms. Hansen's authenticity with her reported incidents.
Yeah. I'm trying to get some stuff from Leo Sprinkle's archive at the moment. I'm in like a wait list for things from there, because I think that's going to be like the next. So the at the moment, I'm like editing the second part of this Dulce video, which is about kind of like the original cattle mutilations of like Gabe Valdez and all that kind of stuff. And then the next one's going to be a bit more kind of like in depth about Leo Sprinkle. I guess that's like another thing that I find really interesting as well, is trying to go back and look at a lot of these characters that are I never know whether I'm using this word right. It's like venerated. Is that the right word? Like people that are like, you know what I mean? Like, well, kind of more respected people within the world of UFOlogy, and trying to go back and look at them with a bit more of a critical eye. People like Leo Sprinkle, for example, who strikes me as like one of the most sus people. Just like very,
Certainly in
dubious.
hindsight,
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Benowitz was, by all indications, erratic and struggling. Might be a polite way to put it. And Dr. Sprinkle decided that regressive hypnosis might be a good idea with people in this chain of events. And I mean, it kind of rode in on the back of what Dr. Simon did with the Hills, and then kind of set the stage for another 30, 40, 50 years of just outright misinformation and people suffering in the UFO world.
Yeah. It's like dreadful. It really, like, you go back and you look at some of these like again, like especially with the Myrna Hansen stuff, like if any of that is true and any of that happened, it's kind of horrific to have somebody say, for just saying that it is real, if somebody had had that experience or believed that they had that experience, then to take them and regress them for 8 hours multiple times, move them down to Albuquerque, also regress their child, put them in the back of a car with tinfoil in the windows. I mean, you're talking like some real wild stuff if it's indeed true. Yeah, very, very, very intense. I actually as part of like this project, so I was trying to interview as many people as possible. I did actually interview Rick Doty, and he spun an interesting tale about Myrna Hansen, which again I feel like is like kind of designed to send me down a rabbit hole of madness, because he was telling me some wild things, about like polygraph tests that were done whilst under hypnosis, and some real like crazy stories that probably won't make it into this because I don't think that they're very true, but yeah, wild.
Again, and I wanted to say that you're talking about Leo Sprinkle, and I have back 20 feet away from me, I have a lot of his personal correspondence and abduction studies and different things. And also at the University of Utah Special Archives, they have Dr. Frank Salisbury's work and his communications with Leo Sprinkle, and those are absolutely fascinating. I don't, I from what I have researched with regard to Leo Sprinkle, I believe that he bought into this 100%. I could be wrong. But I mean, definitely to do things and to do what happened, like with David Jacobs and Emma Woods, and some of these things where we have vulnerable people leading them down a path without real knowledge of what's going on is very suspect.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, because I didn't know how involved Leo Sprinkle was with like the cow mutilation issue. Like he even regressed Nellie Lewis, who is the owner of Snoopy the horse, which is, not entirely sure why she would need to be hypnotically regressed, but it just all gets a little bit strange. And there's a bit in the book Mute Evidence, which is like such a good book, and it's a real shame that it's out of publication now. Like I think you can pick it up relatively cheap, but there's a bit in there, I can't remember for the life of me who it is that he is involved in regressing, but there's a bit where he literally plants a story in this person's hypnotic regression, and it's so like, I mean, unethical doesn't even begin to cover that. You know, like it might seem like a small thing, but something like that could do like irreparable damage to somebody, especially when you've got them in like a real kind of like a sensitive state, you know, like it's really disturbing. So I think with a lot of this stuff, I'm not trying to like, I don't want to kind of like go back and be like, everybody's, you know, this person's sus, that person's, you know, point fingers at people. But I think it's important because so many of these like figures in the UFO world have kind of like, they've gone for a long time without a lot of critical investigation, because I feel like, you know, like the UFO world has kind of gone like, oh, you know, just UFOs, isn't it? Like it's not, it hasn't had, I think it's got a lot more now. It hasn't had a lot of like real kind of like critical, like investigative, like an eye on it. Yeah. So I don't want to like, you know, defame people, but at the same time, I feel like so many of these characters that really like contributed to a lot of the myth and a lot of the stories that then have become so ingrained in like in the UFO world. I think they deserve a little bit of a critical eye.
Especially when they gained like hero status, and
Yeah.
like even while they were working, they had undeserved respect.
Yeah.
And then in hindsight, they're made absolute legends, and
Yeah.
the things that weren't real in the first place are exaggerated and made bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of I won't name names, but there's a lot of people I think that could fit that bill, definitely.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, Emily, that you know the borderline crimes, things like that. You know, that certainly in an ethical sense,
Mm-hmm.
and you've delved into the cults as
Mm-hmm.
well. It's been my experience that a lot of times the public at large and even the court systems at times kind of feel like if the victim got involved in this, well, then like there's not a lot of
Yeah.
empathy for
Yeah.
how you could get yourself in this mess.
Yeah.
Where I think that might be what gives like the three people sitting here more empathy is it's easier when you've been involved in some of these
Mm-hmm.
groups and you've read the books and you've watched YouTube and you've gone to the meetings and you've met these people. It's easier to see how one compromise at a time you end up in a Cadillac with tinfoil in the window being hypnotically regressed.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be like society at large usually has a low tolerance?
Yes.
Like they're more into denying the things they've done that were poor judgment, possibly.
Yeah, and I think that's it. That's an important point. And I get this a lot, and I try not to reply to any of these comments. I try to ignore them a lot, but I get a lot of comments on, especially like because I've done quite a few videos on religious cults about how could somebody be so stupid? How gullible do you have to be? And I'm like, it's got nothing to do with intelligence. It's got nothing to do with gullibility. It's got everything to do with what your life is like, your environment, your socio-economic conditions. Like, are you poor? Can you have you got like, you know, bad health problems? Are you suddenly find yourself your relationship ended and you've got nowhere to live and you've got bills up to your eyeballs and you've got no health care and you've got all of these things, and that those are the things that really kind of like drive people into kind of more kind of, you know, like religious kind of cults and stuff from my experiences. And you know, that's what I've seen, especially like a good example of that, and what you were saying was going back to the Love Has Won cult. A woman that I spoke to who ran an advocacy group for people that had family members within Love Has Won. Her brother, she talks about this relatively openly. Her brother was dosed by them and kind of sent out on a mission, like a mission for God in Colorado, and was out walking for hours and hours and hours. I mean, we're talking like hours. He got taken to a hospital. He had like his feet were all messed up. He was like half naked. I mean, he was not well. But they just didn't hold him. They were like, "Oh no, he's fine. Just let him go. You know, do whatever." And there was never any like repercussions. Nobody like there to try and like help this person who was like clearly struggling. There's no kind of, I don't know if this is like the right answer to your question, but there's a lot of people that are like, oh well, you can't do anything about it. You just got to like let them do what they're doing, and it's like, yeah.
No. And I want to say that when you talk about that, it reminds me of several of the different schools here in Utah that have been investigated. Paris Hilton was involved in one sent to, and we have places where we're sending kids we're trying
like
to
troubled teens,
and things like that, and we're sending them out and we're depriving them of food and water and really torturing them in hopes to scare them straight.
Yeah.
And so this is not just this is a wider spread problem in that regard. Thank you for bringing that up, actually.
Yeah, it's just I feel like there's a lot of like there's a lot of judgment that people can have, and they like, oh, how could somebody be so stupid? But I feel like it is a chain of events, right? If things happen in your life, and they push you to a point where that seems like a good option, right? Especially when there isn't a safety net, right? Especially in the case of America, the safety nets are they don't exist, right? There's no healthcare. There's no, So when you get yourself into a that kind of situation, it can be some of these groups and people, especially people like that who literally prey on people. I can get you this. I will do this for you. Everything will be fine if you just follow what I'm saying. It's not. When you look at it like that and you try and have again, like go back to the empathy thing, when you try and like look at it from a different perspective, it becomes very understandable why a lot of people kind of get pulled into it. And again, like same with like secret space program, right? It's like escapism. And this is the thing, and this is why I don't, not to go, I know that a lot of people, I always get this comment of like, Emily makes really good videos, but whenever she goes on a political rant, it gets really annoying. But like people always say things like, take the politics out of this. How can you take it out of it? How can you? Like it is all intrinsically linked, right?
It's married, absolutely married.
Completely. And like a lot of these people that find themselves embroiled in the secret space program stuff, they want to believe that they're super soldiers. Why is that? Well, a lot of it is escape from everyday life. When your everyday life sucks, you've got to go to a job that you hate all day every day. You're not getting paid very well. Things feel very bleak and hopeless. It can be a really good escape to start getting involved in a little subculture, a little community, and it is a community for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important point. I think is one of the things I witnessed, like in the 1990s, was that a lot of the organized UFO meetings, the regional meetings, the groups that were organized, ran them like pseudo support groups. And like you say, sometimes with churches or organized religion or cults, you might be in need of financial support or spiritual support or a roof over your head that might make you more apt to indoctrination for your physical well-being. Where I was observing people that would receive emotional support and have it reinforced with increasingly fantastic stories about aliens.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and you know, the obvious question is, well, why? Well, in some of these circumstances, people are writing books, you know. Like I think that hypnosis served the purpose of getting evidence for books that was otherwise non-existent in a lot of cases. But and then it kind of trickled down in these support group like settings. I think a lot of the people in those believed the narratives, and then it makes them feel better, and it solidifies their belief. It strengthens their fears, alleviates their fears, and strengthens their confidence when other people will say the same things. And to kind of bring the whole point home to what we were saying about treading lightly, about interviewing people, and when people are really vested in a belief, I also came to believe a lot of the time they're right that something very traumatic did happen to them, something awful did happen, there has been a cover up. I just don't think it's often about extraterrestrials.
Same. Yeah, that's kind of pretty much my exact opinion on it as well. And again, like, and the thing that annoys me, again, I know that it's really comfortable for people to not have to think about anything to do with like politics, you know, when you're touching on a lot of these subjects, but especially in UFOlogy, like the amount of real like hardcore right wing rhetoric that has been involved in, and it's not a new thing. Like go right the way back, you know, to like people like William Dudley Pelley, right, and the Silver Shirts, and he was massively involved in like early UFO movements, and the kind of like George Adamski's and George Hunt Williamson, all of those kind of characters. This real kind of like right wing individualist thread that runs through a lot of it, and also connects up with a lot of these new age movements, but also connects up with things like QAnon now, right? It's all like, it's like a big pot of like things that are all kind of stewing together. But so much that binds it together is a real kind of like hardcore right wing free market capitalist ideology, and that is something that I think is like important to look into a lot more.
And I agree, and I think you talk about in your video, your film, your documentary about the secret space program and some of these people in the Vril Society and some of all of this, and then you look at the who is the newest poster girl for the Vril Society, Marina
Saran,
and
awful
people that are kind of bringing in, I mean, the same old narrative and some of the same old talking points that are really dangerous.
Yeah.
And this, I will definitely say that this doesn't go for, I mean, I can't say that this is, I mean, there's right wing and then there's extremism, on both sides. I will say I definitely, I think what's happening on a certain side is a little bit more problematic. And it's been a common thread in the UFO world since the inception of the subject in the 40s, and the neo-Nazi, the way that different groups can be used to recruit people, to radicalize people, is really important to understand. This is very dangerous. It is very real. And when you look at UFO Twitter, you can see people who are promoting the same propaganda and this dysfunctional, I mean, these ideologies that are just very troubling. And I will say that I hope that somebody somewhere is monitoring that kind of rhetoric, and then the death threats towards NASA officials and the death threats to people who are speaking out. or raising a question about David Grush and things like
oh yeah, like the guy from The Intercept.
yeah,
who's become like enemy number one.
I know, it's like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, there's a real problem
Wild.
and
it's wild. He's like, but he's kind of having a nice time with it, I feel, at the moment, because he's been doing some trolling, and it's quite funny. The fact that he got News Nation to report that he'd been fired from his job just because they didn't read the second tweet in his thread is brilliant. Like, it tells you everything that you need to know about News Nation, right? Like, that's it right there.
yeah,
that's like the level of research.
Is there talk a little bit, I mean, if you wouldn't mind, because this is something Jack and I are both interested in, but about, the people, Bill Cooper, some of the people that really went off and, distrust the government. And then you've got the militia movements and some of this type of thing taking place. Now you can look at people in the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, who's now serving a 20-year prison sentence, and people for the January 6th, trying to overthrow the government. Let's just be real on that one. But you look at how they kind of are interwoven with the UFO community. I mean, give us some thoughts about that, because I think this is really important, and people in the UFO sphere don't want to look at that, and I don't know why.
Yeah, Bill Cooper's an interesting one, because again, I have to say, like, so many of these characters have like spooky backgrounds, right? Like he maybe not necessarily him to a larger extent, but he was a guy that came onto the scene and said, like, oh, I had Q clearance and I saw X, Y, and Z and stuff, and he was making up all manner of stuff. And he was really good friends with John Lear, right? Him and John Lear start weaving these narratives. And who did John Lear work for? He worked for the CIA. He flew planes for Air America. Like, a lot of these, it's like little connections, make you go like, oh, I always get like a little siren going off in my head whenever I hear about any of these characters. But Bill Cooper's one that people always he's more one of, like, obviously very visible because of his book, right? Behold a Pale Horse. And again, very connected to New Age worlds. That was published by a hardcore New Age publisher, right? The only reason that book got published is because somebody channeled who did they channel? They channeled, like, it was some, I don't think it was Sanat Kumara, but it was somebody, it was another kind of entity that said, like, oh, Bill Cooper's written this book, it ain't great, but you should publish it anyway. Like, this channeling came through. But there was another guy that was really involved in that scene who doesn't get spoken about a lot, called Vladimir Tzitziki. And he pushed so much of the Vril Society stuff. He pushed a documentary that was kind of, was one of the, I don't want to say, it might have been one of the first places, possibly. Anyway, that it included the Vril Society, and what was her name? I've forgotten her name from the Vril Society. She didn't exist. She was hang on a second, I'm going to find it, because it's going to annoy me if I don't find the right name. This is what I'm like. I'm too pedantic, right? I'm just too Maria Orsic, right? So that came from a documentary called UFO Secrets of the Third Reich, and it was two Austrian guys that had made it, and it was in the early 90s, and Vladimir Tzitziki was taking it to all of these UFO conferences, right, in the early 90s, and he was there with people like Al Bielek and Duncan Cameron and Preston Nichols from the Montauk Project, but he was also at the same conferences as oh god, guy, I'm forgetting his name, part of the Gulf Breeze 6, and I can't remember his name, and it's on the tip of my tongue.
Davis.
Yes, that's it. That's the one. It's literally on the tip of my tongue. He was like talking at these they're all at these conferences together, right? And he's like showing this it's a neo-Nazi documentary about Maria Orsic. Like, it's really kind of dark and horrible. And there's transcripts of Vladimir Tzitziki in this at this UFO conference, and going on just the most like horrific anti-communist tirades, right? About, you know, the Illuminati all gonna institute communism, and communism's the biggest evil imaginable. So it's this real kind of like, it's a real kind of, you know, like, let's say right wing, it's anti-communist stuff that weaves through so much of these stories and kind of weaves them together. Bill Cooper's a lot like that as well, but massively like that. And then Bill Cooper also, sorry, I feel like I'm like really rambling, but Bill Cooper also
you're on the. I like it. Thank you.
Okay. But Bill Cooper also like publishes in his book, you know, like he publishes the full protocols of the Elders of Zion, right? Like anti-Semitic hoax. He talks about alternative 3 being real, and he, you know, I mean, makes some wild claims. So there was so much that, like, Bill Cooper's become very much kind of like the face of this kind of anti-communist, very like right wing libertarian kind of guy. But there were so many of them, and this Vladimir Tzitziki guy, I mean, at some point I feel like I want to do like a more kind of in-depth dive into him, because he kind of disappeared off the face of the planet, but he was so involved in these groups and so involved in pushing like the Nazi UFO stories in the early 90s. But again, like this kind of, and it is an anti-communist rhetoric. It has been there since the very beginning. You know, go all the way back to the late 40s, early 50s. All of the original contactees somehow were all getting you know, we're all anti-communist, and well, not all of them. But,
you know, I mean, Jack can tell us a little bit about NICAP and some of the people involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was an anti-communist rhetoric, but would you agree, Emily, that people like Cooper, and we could mention more names that are even still at it to some extent, that came in that style, seem to use the topic UFOs and then the government conspiracy as a means, like a vehicle to get a following and to get attention. Yeah. And so then they do use that anti-communist rhetoric, yet we can also look at the FBI files and see that they were concerned about abductees and contactees, I guess they called them at the time. And as Erica says, the NICAP, some of their stances and positions, that the FBI had concerns that they were communist agendas. That, you know, this, you know, Director Hoover and his boys weren't so sure this anti-nuclear war thing was altogether a good American position to have, you know? Yeah, and like to be more clear about that, the conservative position was to build up an arsenal, and some people may remember that in the 80s, President Reagan's position was, he called nuclear warheads peacekeepers. And so then in the 50s and the 60s, when contactees would say that they're getting these visions of annihilation and that the aliens say we're to do away with the nuclear warheads, the right wing politics wasn't bought in on that aspect of it.
It's interesting as well, like I Am, right? So like the I Am group, if you read through a lot of their FBI files, from what I can remember, because I haven't read through them in like a year and a half, but I did spent hours, I think days, reading through them, and they're like simultaneously being they're being like reported for potentially like having some sort of communist involvement or stuff like that, but they're also at the same time probably one of the most anti-communist religious organizations possible, from what I can remember. I mean, also there was all sorts of people reporting them for X, Y, and Z thing, and then a lot going on.
Yeah, there was, and I'd like to just take a moment to echo Erica's sentiment there that I haven't felt you're rambling at all. It's actually very refreshing, encouraging. I feel really good to see someone significantly younger than I am that has learned the things you have, that has gone in and done the research and is connecting these dots. And it's like just knowing their history. Like, we have to understand what's happened to have an idea of what's happening now. And it like, honestly, it helps my feeling that humanity will be okay when I see people doing things like you're doing.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice to hear. I'm glad. I do try. The history is super important, especially like with all of the things that you're seeing now, and especially with how prevalent it is and how many people in my my normal life, like everyday life, like offline life. I was at like a little kind of like gathering, and my friend's husband said to me, he was like, concisely explain what the hell's going on with this whole UFO thing. And I was like, really? You really
Right.
want? And I must have I started talking, and I could just see him zone out. I could just see like the life get sucked out of his eyes, because he was probably expecting me to be like, oh yeah, the government have got X, Y, and Z. But I was just going on like this massive tirade about how like it's just nonsense. Don't believe it. Like, it's all like, be very, very skeptical. But so much of it comes from all of these like, take a breath. For example, like the things that David Grush was saying, some of that you can trace it back decades and decades. But like one thing I found interesting was him saying non-human biologics, right? What's the difference between that and extra EBE, right? Or EBEN, like the doty stuff. Yeah. Like, it's the same thing.
Ask Linda, she'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same. Right. But the thing that concerns me about it, I guess now, is like, this is really going out to like a massive audience. I mean, when you've got like people like my friend's husband asking me about it, that's when you know that it's like, it's reached a point where like people really are seeing it. Right. And it's, I guess it can, I don't know, it feels a little bit, I don't know, like scary, I guess, or like a bit like worrying that kind of narrative is going to get accepted, or like a lot of people will just end up believing it because the history is so complicated and convoluted, because I can't give a concise explanation in 60 seconds, that people would just go whatever, and never really kind of look into it. Yeah, it's worrying.
No, I think that's a wonderful way to put that. And I think it is concerning, to say the least, that people like Lou Elizondo and David Grush and Hal Puthoff and Kit Green and Brandon Fugel and some of these people who have knowingly promoted lies for many, many years and are making a living off of it, but also swaying different groups of people. I think that is very critical. And I have to say that, if there should be something worthy of study, there is something worthy of study. And I think it is, if people truly feel there is something worthy of study, then they can't ride the coattails or even be associated with this group of people that
Exactly.
does not have truth in their minds. So
Exactly, and they just and they also I don't know, like when I first started getting into all of this stuff, you know, when I was much younger than I am now, it was, you know, even though it has always been like this, I feel like, right, because a lot of people think that I'm like a debunker, right? I feel like I've got like a weird reputation for being like a debunker. Like I'm not. I genuinely do believe in like a lot of weird things, a lot of like high strangeness, all of that kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm like skeptical when I need to be. Well, I'm kind of skeptical all the time, but like debunkery, I guess, when I need to be, like direct it in towards the right people. But a lot of this kind of destroys the ability to get to any sort of truth, and just further obscures it, and also just makes the whole I don't know. I just think that a lot of these characters need to be removed from this conversation, you know, like former intelligence agents and the like should not be involved in this.
No, they shouldn't. And that's what makes me, if you've got people like this, I mean, literally Jeremy Corbell, who is known to promote absolute fraud, lies. He's promoting videos that are leaked. I mean, George Knapp, we've got these leaked documents, and it's like, well, first of all, dude, you'd be freaking in jail. Okay, it would be prison. That doesn't happen. And people are using their critical thinking skills to actually say, wait a minute, okay, if something was leaked, this is what would happen. This is, if somebody has a classified, if they've got a security clearance, this is what they have privy to. This is how many thousands of people have security clearances. Unfortunately, as we've seen with, David Grush, I mean, people have, or people that I know personally have had security clearances and have gone under the radar with very questionable and alarming behavior, actually, and it has taken a while for security clearances to be revoked. So there's a lot of things that fly under the radar, unfortunately, and so I think we definitely have to call these things into account. And it is sad that people that put forward good questions and say, hey, here we have this, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, everybody's like, wear your ribbon, and we stand with Crush, and okay, well, how about we stand with Emma Woods? We stand with people that have been abused at the hands of a handful of people who promoted not only disinformation, but really harmful material for many decades. People that are now speaking in front of, a congressional committee who are promoting absolute garbage. There has to be, I mean, and like I said, people who are promoting UAP truth and wanting to get good science done shouldn't be under fear of having their lives, their families doxxed and things like that. So if you really care about UAP disclosure, if you really care about scientifically looking into this and getting to the bottom of all of this, then you have to stand firm and stand up and say, no, I do not accept this person. I don't accept that person. This is harmful to the true study of all of this, and I don't see that. And that really, it's that's pretty, I don't know, that's pretty sad to me. We need to
no, it is.
And
it's
go ahead.
Well, it's like it's like what's happening now with that guy from The Intercept, right? It's like, you can not like what he published. That's fine. You don't have to like it. But it almost feels like there's this kind of mass consensus that it shouldn't have been published, that we're not allowed to publish it. And I'm like, maybe he could have gone about, phrasing it a little bit more delicately, or, whatever. You can have, your gripes with it or whatever. But I do think that it, people saying it's not relevant at all. Well, I kind of think it is. It is relevant. The things that he published. There has to be, like, especially when you've got somebody standing up making real fantastical claims like that, it's kind of, all over the news nation everywhere, like I'm seeing constantly. I think it's important, you know, to like dig into that person's story a little bit more. And I don't think that it's like and the thing is, I don't think anybody even said, like, you know, because he's got PTSD that doesn't make him trustworthy. Like, I don't think anybody said that. But I think if there are certain things that have happened, and I'm trying to be sensitive about this, right? Because of course, like, everybody goes through mental health, like everybody's had mental health issues and stuff like that. But if there are certain things going on in a person's life, it can make them a little bit more susceptible to certain things, right? You know, and some of that could be being told stories from the same set of people that have been telling stories for years, right? Almost. And as the thing with me, I almost think that to begin with, I was like, I don't believe that, like, David Grush was telling the truth, but I think that maybe he is telling the truth from his perspective, like what he's been told. This is true to him. And again, it goes back to that, right? It's like, that's true to him now because he's been told that, and almost, you know, some people might not agree with my phrasing, but almost groomed in a way to be kind of like the figurehead, you know, like the new face, the fresh face of UAPs. That's how it kind of seems.
There's a lot of that. I mean, there is grooming. I mean, these people groom vulnerable people, and I think that's unfortunate. And whether that will hold to be true, and, you know, we'll find, I'm sure, more information out in the future about that. But I do think it you know, a person's, he wasn't, and I just want to be clear about this, there weren't things that were leaked about him. This is a public record.
Yeah.
You know, just like it is a matter of public record about things I'm involved in, and everybody, you know, that is truthful about who they are. You know, that's the way it goes. And as a result of me being public about who I am and everybody knowing where I am, you know, I have had a lot of blowback, a lot of attempts to discredit me. And yet I will say, you know, I have not heard, I mean, I've heard maybe a handful of people over the past decade that have stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, you're discrediting this person, this woman. You're using these shameful ways to do it. You know, I stand with Erica Lukes. Where are you guys? Give me a break. But you go back and you stand with David Grush, and you know, get back to me on that.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And it's also like, there's so many other like interesting characters that are involved in this, from like other like former intelligence agents that are kind of popping up. Like, you guys are probably familiar with people like Angeli, or you know, like John Ramirez.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Angeli was one of my discarded projects, but maybe I'll have to dust it off at some point, because that's, you know, another strange rabbit hole.
The thing that gets me, Emily, with these stories, these narratives, anecdotes, educated people that have been officers in the intelligence community should understand the importance of conclusive evidence. And so I really have a problem when Mr. Grush, Mr. Elizondo, Mr. Mellon present themselves as if they don't understand why their assertion would not be accepted on trust. That is a fundamental issue with me, that they do not at least take an empathetic position of, I understand it's just a story and I should have brought proof. Like, that's just a real red flag to me. And as far as Ken Klippenstein, I think he was just doing his job. And like Erica said, it's public records. He did a FOIA request. He got material. He published it. That's what reporters do. It's up to the public now to sort out its relevance or not and have that public conversation. And if the man was not trying to be accepted on trust alone, would be entirely irrelevant.
Yes, exactly. 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 And the thing is, I don't even think that it doesn't even impact, I think, on like his trustworthiness. It's more a case of like I said, certain events have certain things happen in somebody's life that make them more susceptible to, even things like, being blackmailed or being kind of like coerced, forced into certain situations, like that kind of stuff. It's like some of the takes that I'm seeing, like, are people that are like, you shouldn't have published this, it's a smear piece, this is blah 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 blah. I'm like, it is relevant. And exactly like you said, like, man's standing up there making fantastical claims, and becoming like the face of this.
And behaves as if he doesn't understand he needs to have proof for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's what really ruins. It's hard for me to think that they are being sincere when they don't demonstrate, and as intelligence officers, the importance of differentiating between what people say and what people demonstrate.
Absolutely.
So I will say it is interesting that, you've got the testimony of Grush, you've got the fact that he went on to different media outlets and gave much more information than he did under oath, which should be a red flag. But it's anyway. But then also you've got the blowback because people are questioning what he put forward, the fact that it's he can't provide specific information. And now there's this big, oh my goodness, wait a minute, he's got, all of these things going on and people are defaming him and yada, yada, yada. Well, I think let's go back to basics. He gave testimony. None of it can be verified. That's the point. So
it sure is.
Go back to that point. But people want to go on and on about the defamation of somebody. And I also wanted to say that it doesn't matter what profession you are in, you're a person, you're prone to different, things that happen in your life, different stresses, PTSD. You're prone to, just because you're in the military doesn't mean that you are of good moral fiber and that you can't be led down a rabbit hole or you can't be bought and paid for. It's just simply not the case. So, and Ted, I appreciate your comments in here. And if it can be verified in a secure setting, then what Grish said and offered, then that was good. But why, when he was protected under the Whistleblower Act, why wasn't that information put forward? It's like, just here we've got these little smatterings of this and that. And again, it's just, these are stories we've heard for 70 years now. So where is the proof?
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, I could have given that testimony. I've heard all that too,
I think he would have done a better job. I think he would have.
I think too, if he would have had people behind him other than Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, then people would have taken this more seriously. And so I think it's on the people that are saying, this is credible testimony, to say, wait a minute, what about the lies George Knapp was told? What about the lies Jeremy Corbell built their careers on lies?
Yeah.
Bob Lazar. I mean, all of these things. It's like, okay, come on, guys. Let's get back.
Yeah. Why wasn't Bob there? I wish that Bob Lazar should have been there, right? He would have been a good whistleblower. Just.
I mean, and again, it's sad because there is something worthy of study. This isn't it. And if you put your hat on this, then I don't even know what to say. But we should be allowing people like Jeremy Corbell and and George Knapp to be, the top bar for this. It's just simply, it's just crap.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I'm done with it. At the end of the show, what can I say?
No, I feel the same way.
Letting me go off on that tangent, but I mean, again, Emily, what you've done, the documentaries that you put together are so amazing, and this is a great way to educate the public because you've gone down, specific roads. You've done the research. You're amazing at putting things together, and I think this is really great. You're one of the few people on YouTube and out there in the sphere, on Twitter when you're there, like that we have, that can put together information that other people can assimilate and then hopefully learn from. And I respect that and I appreciate that. And it's an honor to get to know you. And
thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you so much.
What are you doing? So what can we look forward to next?
So my second video on the origins of the Dulce conspiracy is out next week. So that's that's all kind of more kind of theories about what was going on there. A lot of stuff about Operation Gas Buggy and a lot of the things about Sagebrush Rebellion and the big cattle mutilation conference that happened in Albuquerque where Paul Benowitz met Gabe Valdez for the first time. It kind of covers that whole thing. And then after that, a bit on like Leo Sprinkle, fingers crossed, and then kind of going into Paul Benowitz and Majestic 12. But I'm hoping that my sanity can stay intact while I'm making these. So it remains to be seen.
Well, you're doing a great job. And if you need, contact me if you need any help and any stuff with Leo Sprinkle, any of the files.
Oh, I absolutely will.
Here, let me know because I would be more than happy to help you.
That would be amazing. Yeah. That would be so good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if we can help with any FOIA work or anything like that too, we would be happy.
Maybe you can. Maybe you can help me because all of mine always get rejected.
I would certainly be happy to try. Yeah, let me know. Nice. Let me know what you're working on, and I'll see if I can figure out a way or two to word it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I wish I had something to offer you both.
It's fun I might have to pick your brain on the way you do your documentaries.
Yeah,
sure. You can come and do voiceover in some of in the next one. I'll give you some.
I love
like a guest appearance.
So I love doing voiceovers.
Perfect. There we go.
Yep. That was fun. Those were the days. I need to get back to doing voiceovers, but
nice.
If you need me, I'm your girl. So
absolutely. Definitely going to hit you up.
Sweet. Okay. And I appreciate that. And it's really fun, like I said, just to meet new people. And thank you, Jack, for introducing me to Emily and bringing Emily on the show. And I think it's been very powerful to have the people we have on our show lately. They're younger voices in this, and they're people who are capable of looking through, like you, Emily, looking through all of this and making sure that we're getting to the truth, that we're using critical thinking skills. And Quest, thanks for the nice comment. So yeah, and thanks, Sheldon, all of you guys in chat. I appreciate you very much. It is, as all of you know, and just to go off here for a little bit, it's been a very trying week for me, especially with the domestic abuse stuff coming to a head and trying to go up against the Salt Lake City Police Department to get actual information and seeing the person that was, killed with the FBI. So these have been challenges for me that those of you who know me understand what that looks like and how that manifests sometime. But I also definitely share that at the end of the show because of some of the pitfalls you get when you fall into conspiracy or you get lined up with people who are promoting things that are very dangerous to the public or dangerous to your own personal safety and mental health. So I just wanted to go out there and just say that really quickly. So thank you very much for letting me share that. And thank you, Peter and Michael Reynolds. I do look forward to getting over there. Rachel and Tom X. When I go through Sheldon, Quest, I'm repeating you guys. Bill, Jack and I will be reaching out to you. Thank you for the wonderful offer to help us. Drew Williamson, Ted. Nice to see all of you guys here tonight. Thanks for your support. And Emily, I wish you the best. I look forward to talking to you very soon. So prepare yourself and we'll work together.
Absolutely.
Stuff. So
amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jack. Go to Expanding Frontiers Research to check out all of our work. And then good night, Emily. And then also make sure you go to Expanding Frontiers on Patreon to help with the show costs. I appreciate that. It is wonderful, as you know, and I talk about this sometimes. It has been a labor of love to do this and to make costs to keep the show on the air, which sometimes is very difficult, and it actually hasn't worked, but I appreciate those of you who support me. Expanding Frontiers Research is an important organization for many different reasons. We're broaching a lot of different topics, and I am very grateful to work with people like Jack Brewer and Barry Greenwood and others who are volunteering their time to make Expanding Frontiers such an important organization. So I want to thank all of you. I won't be here next Friday because I'm actually taking the weekend off, and I'm going to go out and live a little bit and enjoy life. And then I might post some pictures on Twitter of what I'm doing. So anyway, I appreciate all of you guys. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you in a couple weeks. All right. Stay safe. Good night.